The rotor wash clawed at the morning fog as the old Bell 47J bucked in the wind over Elliott Bay. Panic trembled in the cabin, oxygen thin, metallic. CEO Amelia North stared at the altimeter as it dipped and wavered, her breath a metronome of fear. Across from her, the maintenance badge on a navy blue jumpsuit flashed in the spinning light. "Give me the controls," said the janitor. His voice was calm, so calm that the fog seemed to lean in to listen. The helicopter stuttered. A whining belt note rose like a kettle scream. "Mr. Hayes," Amelia gasped, "if we go down—" "We're not going down," he said. "Not today." He feathered the collective, nudged the cyclic, and bumped the throttle just enough to soothe the engine's temper. The bell steadied like a spooked horse recognizing an old rider. For a heartbeat, the world stopped shaking, just breath and sky and the wet gray of Puget Sound. Amelia blinked. Through the canopy, the world spread out. The Seattle skyline with its needle of glass, the freighters, the gulls stitching white against the water. "Who are you?" she whispered. He smiled without answering, eyes scanning the horizon as if the city were a map he had memorized long ago. And that is where the story truly begins, high above the water, where judgment ran thin and truth had to fly. The setup. Earlier that week, Star Harbor Aerotech looked nothing like the old shipyards it replaced. The campus gleamed with solar glass, murals of clouds, and the smell of roasted coffee from the cafe downstairs. Inside, a golden helicopter, Amelia's pride, hung from the atrium rafters like a chandelier. It once belonged to her mother, the late Ruth North, a medevac pioneer who taught herself the precise language of rotors and wind. Every Thursday, Amelia walked beneath that helicopter, looked up and promised the empty benches, "Next quarter, we revived the Heritage Flight." This Thursday, she was late for a board rehearsal. She brusquely tucked her hair into a twist and clicked across the marble floor. The head of facilities jogged beside her with a clipboard. "Ms. North, about the janitorial roster for the atrium. I trust your judgment," she said, distracted. "Just make it sparkle for the gala." He nodded but then slowed, glancing toward a man kneeling near the service elevator. Mid-50s, lean in the way of people who move more than they talk. He wore a navy jumpsuit, the patch above his pocket reading Hayes. He was polishing the brass trim, meticulous, pausing now and then to run his thumb along a nick as if reading Braille. He looked up as Amelia passed. Their eyes met for a second, hers quick, his steady, and then life continued. In the mirrored wall, Amelia caught her own reflection, a woman who had built a company from blueprints and grit, yet hadn't taken a weekend off in 2 years. Everything about her said two things: speed and control. Down in the garage, Mr. Hayes finished his shift and rode the bus home. He got off in West Seattle where the streets tilt toward sunset. A girl of about 10 waited on a stoop, her backpack a fading galaxy. She stood when she saw him, then ran, then stopped halfway as if remembering she was trying out "grown up." "You're late," she said, but she was already hugging him, her voice muffled. "Granddad, we're out of cereal." "We'll fix that," he said. "We fix things." At the corner store, he let her pick the cereal. She chose 2 boxes, one practical, one with cartoon stars. On the walk back, he signed her homework folder while she told him about the school play and a friend who moved away and a math problem shaped like a rocket. He listened the way some folks listen to weather, not to change it, but to understand what might be coming. At night, when the girl Lily fell asleep, he opened a shoebox in the hall closet. Inside was a single photograph, a younger version of him beside a different helicopter, an olive green machine with rescue stripes, his arm around a woman in a flight suit. On the back, a scrawl: "For once, land didn't feel like giving up. M." He traced the edge of the photo and closed the box. The challenge. The gala came in with the rain, clear tents, city lights mirrored in puddles, swing band tuning their brass like bright questions. The golden helicopter gleamed above the crowd. Guests arrived in bright scarves and sharper jokes, the city's donors and dreamers colliding under a banner that read, "Star Harbor Aerotech Scholarship Fund." "Bring them home." Amelia took the stage. "My mother flew nights," she began. "She believed a city is measured by how it saves strangers. Tonight we fund futures, the engineers who'll design safer skies, the pilots who'll fly them." Applause rose like heat. At table 7, a venture capitalist smirked into his champagne. Noble, but can she fly the relic? Nearby, the head of facilities caught a server's elbow. Champagne spilled. The server apologized. The spill licked the floor like a comet. Mr. Hayes was there instantly with a cloth, working quietly, unnoticed by most. When the band hit a standard and the first dance opened the floor, a retired news anchor laughed near the stage mic and called out, "Ms. North, rumor has it you promised a demonstration flight." The crowd turned with a hunger only parties give. Amelia, caught, smiled. "We don't fly the Atrium model," she said smoothly. "She's a heritage piece. But we do have a working bell outside for photo ops." The anchor, bouncy on borrowed nerve, grinned. "Then show us a hover, boss lady." Some cheers went up, good-natured but invasive. Amelia smiled thinly. "After dessert," she promised. At the edge of the tent, Mr. Hayes set down his cloth. He looked toward the parking area, where the company's bell sat beneath floodlights, a queen in a glass crown. Out by the aircraft after the toast, Amelia felt eyes on her. A small knot of guests had followed. The venture capitalist from table 7 folded his arms. "Talk the talk, North." "Sir," said the head of facilities, prepared to redirect. Amelia looked at the bell. She knew how to pre-flight. She knew controls in theory. She'd flown with her mother, but hands-on had been years ago, and business had a way of stealing muscle memory and calling it leadership. A nerve behind her heart began to drum. A new voice spoke from the shadows, not loud, not timid. "I could take her up." They turned. The janitor stood at a respectful distance, cap in hand. Amelia blinked. "You, Mr. Hayes?" He nodded. "If the demonstration's important." The knot of guests chuckled, cruel because it was easy. "What are you?" the venture capitalist scoffed. "A mop pilot?" Amelia's face went cool. "That's enough," she said to the crowd, then to Mr. Hayes, softer. "Have you flown a Bell 47 before?" He looked past her at the helicopter the way a fisherman looks at tide. "A cousin to her," he said. "I can give you a clean hover. Gentle set down." In and out, she searched his face. It was unadorned truth. No swagger, no hunger to impress. Then the crowd pressed closer, and pride whispered the worst ideas. "All right," she said. "You and me. 10 feet off the ground, 1 minute hover, slow circle. If you pull it off, I'll..." She swallowed the words. "I'll give you a bonus because they tasted like a handout, not respect. I'll sign off on something that matters. Your proposal for the scholarship wing maintenance job. Full benefits." A breath went through the maintenance crew, the kind that sounds like a prayer bumping into relief. The venture capitalist barked a laugh. "This I've got to see." They climbed in. Amelia left seat, Hayes right, and the crowd tightened behind the cones. A photographer darted, capturing faces that looked like they'd paid for ringside seats to either triumph or trouble. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of aviation fuel and old canvas. Hayes ran through pre-flight with practiced efficiency, calling out checks as if teaching. Amelia followed it, her hands trembling in a way she converted into competence. "Ready?" he asked, hand hovering near the collective. She nodded. "Show me." They lifted. The ship quivered, then steadied. A small gasp went up from below. The floodlights turned the fog into a theater scrim. Hayes held the hover, subtle inputs, steady right foot, coaxing, not commanding. Amelia watched his hands, his breathing, his eyes, all quiet. For a moment they were a unit, a two-pilot crew, more than the sum of their seats. Then a shiver, barely there. Hayes frowned. The tail rotor muttered. He decided fast. "We're setting her down," he said. "Already?" called someone below, laughter in it. But he didn't answer. He settled the bell like a mother setting down a sleeping child. Then he killed the engine and listened to it spin down. "What was that?" Amelia asked. "Tail rotor was flirting with mischief," he said. "Maybe nothing." Maybe a whisper before a shout. The head of facilities, who had spent a career decoding machines by their smirks and sighs, nodded slowly. "I'll pull the cowling." The crowd deflated, robbed of spectacle. The venture capitalist scoffed and wandered back to the dessert table. Amelia stayed by the helicopter, the night air cool on her cheeks. She looked at Hayes. "You were right to set her down," she said. Thanks, he replied. Then he adjusted his cap and returned to the quiet work of making places whole. The secret. 2 days later, a storm rolled in before dawn. Wind rattled the windows of Star Harbor Aerotech. A call came from a maritime charity whose event boat had lost power near Alki with elderly passengers aboard. No one was in immediate danger, but the swells were unkind, and the Coast Guard's ETA stretched with each minute. The charity's organizer reached Amelia through a board member. "Do you still have that bell?" he asked breathlessly. "We've got a diabetic who needs insulin delivered. The bridges are a mess. Could you? Just a drop to the boat?" 10 minutes of heroism, that's all. 10 minutes of paperwork, Amelia said wryly, but she was already calculating. The bell's rotor issue had been a worn tensioner, replaced by noon yesterday. The pilot they usually contracted was out of state. She stared through the glass wall at the rain and the helicopter gleaming like a dare. She started to say no, sensible and small. Then she thought of her mother, at 2 a.m., flying into weather because rules are only as good as the lives they serve. "Prep the bell," she told facilities. "I'm calling our pilot." But the pilot was still gone. She hung up. In the silent space that followed, the elevator doors slid open. Hayes stepped out with a toolbox. She met him halfway. "Tell me something," she said. "When you said you'd flown a cousin to our bell, how close a cousin?" He considered his words. The rain pinged at the windows. "Marine One's little country brother," he said at last. Her brow pinched. "I don't speak that dialect." He set down the toolbox. 20 years ago, I crewed for Coast Guard Rescue out of Port Angeles. Bell 212S, Dolphins. Before that, Army utility birds. Nothing fancy. But I learned to land on things that hold still only if you believe they're trying. She stared. The story rearranged itself in her mind, the way a map reorients when you realize north wasn't where you thought. "Why didn't you? Why aren't you?" "It's a long story," he said gently, "and there's a boat in trouble." She nodded, hung speech on a hook called later, and pointed toward the hangar door. "Let's go." They strapped in. Hayes's movements were unshowy, the way pianists warm up without thinking. He handed Amelia a headset. "You're on comms. My eyes will be busy." "Copy," she said, and the word tasted strange, like childhood games made real. They lifted into rain, Seattle blurred and sharpened in sheets, the wheel lights a constellation chart that kept changing its mind. Below, the bay shrugged under wind. Hayes flew low along the shoreline, reading the waves. "There," he said at last. The charity boat wallowed, a toy in bathwater. On the aft deck, a cluster of people waved. An orange life ring shone like a small sun. "Okay," Hayes murmured. "We'll set down a tow on the stern. You'll hop out with the med pack. No heroics. If things talk back, we leave and wait for coasties." The bell's skid kissed the deck once, twice. The third kiss stayed. Amelia popped the door, wind grabbing at her hair. A deckhand reached up. She passed the med pack. A woman in a blue parka, nurse likely, gave a grateful thumb up. The bell shimmied, asking to be gone. Hayes lifted them away, nimble and clean. On the return, he let Amelia fly for 60 seconds, hands light on the cyclic, feet whispering on the pedals, while his hands hovered, ready but not correcting. It was the smallest vote of confidence and the largest. When he took the controls back, he grinned. She found herself smiling too, not because she had done well, though she hadn't done badly, but because a locked door in her heart had been handed a key. They landed at Boeing Field to refuel and file the incident report. In the dull quiet of the hangar, Amelia leaned against the bell. "Tell me the long story," she said. He sighed in the way people do when they put down a heavy bag they've carried too long. "My wife was a nurse," he began. "Her name was Mara. We met when I brought in a fisherman who'd taken a hook where hooks shouldn't go. She stitched the man and read me more code than a Navy manual." He laughed softly. "We married fast. We had Lily's dad, and he had Lily. Accidents and goodbyes piled up like old snow. I kept flying until grief made me careless. So I stopped. Got a job where the hardest thing wasn't the wind. Something honest with a floor that didn't move." He shrugged. "And it turns out I like fixing places people pass through. Lobbies, hallways, They feel like crossroads, and I've always loved a map. Amelia swallowed. I'm sorry, she said, the words as plain and real as bread. He nodded. It's all right. I gave up the sky when it started asking for pieces I couldn't spare. He looked up at the bell, but sometimes I miss saying hello to the horizon without getting introduced. She looked at his hands. They were the hands of someone who could lift a refrigerator with a neighbor on the other side, who could thread a bolt in the dark. She thought of the scholarship's mission statement, to find talent in not obvious places. She thought of her mother and the way she never underestimated the quiet ones. Mr. Hayes, she said, businesslike so she would not cry, I'd like you to help me design a training program. Not just for pilots, for first-generation kids, maintenance techs, logistics, dispatch, real careers. Name your hours. And I'll add one line item for a sure thing. Lily's first scholarship when she's old enough, if she wants it. His lips parted as if to say, you don't have to. He closed them, thought, then nodded. We fix things, he said again, and this time it sounded bigger than groceries. The day the city watched, the story of the insulin drop made the rounds. Human interest dressed in civic pride. It wasn't viral, it was steadier than that. Word of mouth from nurses, tugboat captains, teachers, the kind of people a city leans on without fanfare. A week later, the mayor asked for a small demonstration at a charity air show. Not a stunt, just proof that heroes wear coveralls. Amelia hesitated. Visibility is a currency with exchange rates no one truly understands. But she saw what it would mean to the kids lined up along the fence, eyes bright with the idea that their city could put ordinary people in extraordinary seats. On show day, clear blue stretched from the Cascades to the Olympics. The bell lifted neat and sure. Amelia rode left seat again, headset on. Hayes narrated for the crowd in a low, friendly tone, broadcast over the loudspeakers. How a helicopter balances lift and trust. How teams on the ground make flight possible. How the most important part of a rescue is the part that happens after. The cup of coffee, the ride home, the promise that someone saw you. Then mid-pattern, the bell hiccuped. Not dramatic, just a cough. Hayes didn't pretend it was nothing. He spoke it aloud. We've got a minor vibration. We're returning to land, the crowd murmured. A pilot show when the pilot says no thanks is a strange theater. But the landing was smooth textbook. Afterward, Hayes didn't let the MC turn it into a punchline or a bravado story. He told a larger truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do, he said into the mic, is disappoint a crowd to keep a promise you made to one person at your kitchen table. Silence, then applause that was less noisy and more grateful. In the stands, a teenager in a faded hoodie wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The vibration turned out to be a loose panel that wanted attention. Attention is cheap to the attentive. They tightened it, flew a test after the show, and then went home the long way so Lily could watch from the soccer field as the bell wrote her name in the sky without smoke or letters, just a lazy S-curve no one else knew how to read. The reveal. A month later, Star Harbor Aerotech launched the Ruth North Initiative, Pathways to the Skies. It offered apprenticeships for maintenance, scholarships for under-resourced students, and stipends for single caregivers. The first class included a barber's son, a nurse's daughter, a mechanic who thought he was too old at 27, and a poet who'd been told she'd never do math. At the ceremony, the crowd was smaller and cozier than the gala. No venture capitalists circling, just families in their Sunday best sneakers. Amelia introduced the program, then called Hayes to the front. He wore his jumpsuit and a clean collared shirt beneath. He kept looking for a place to hold his hands. Finally, he folded them as if in silent prayer. Some of you know him as the quiet man who fixes things, Amelia said. Tonight you'll also know him as the man who helped us fly small mercies to strangers and big possibilities to our kids. As applause rose, she added one last piece. There's something else, she said. Mr. Hayes won't say it, but I will. Years ago, off the coast, my mother took a call she couldn't refuse, a troubled fishing boat in weather that thought it was bigger than us. She got there to find a Coast Guard crew already working the problem. She always said she learned more in that hour than in any year of school. She never forgot the crew chief who told her, "No heroics, just bring them home." She scribbled his name in the margin of her log. I found it last week. She turned the logbook toward the audience. Crew Chief R. Hayes. The room went still. Hayes stared. He shook his head as if trying to shake loose a memory, then laughed softly at the trick the world had played. So, Amelia finished, voice thick, if you want to know why the Ruth North Initiative exists, it's because one day a long time ago, a stranger's voice changed our family's weather. He stepped to the mic. It took him a beat to speak. All I did was what we're supposed to do, he said. But if you hand me a broom or a collective, I'll try to use it to bring somebody home. The landing. That summer, the bell flew only when it had a reason. Reasons turned out to be plentiful. A relay of textbooks to a flooded school, a lift of hope to a veteran who hadn't left his house in months and said he would if he could see the city from above one more time, a surprise flight for apprentices who passed their FAA written exam. One evening, Amelia and Hayes stood in the hangar bay after the apprentices' flight. The sunset poured honey through the open doors. The city hummed, not loud, just present. Do you miss it, flying? She asked him. He watched Lily on the tarmac showing her best cartwheel to two apprentices who pretended not to be impressed and were hopelessly impressed. I miss the part where you stop blaming yourself for gravity, he said, but I don't miss debt to the sky. I like paying my dues on the ground. Good, she said, surprising herself with relief, because I need you where you are. The kids believe you, he nodded. They believe you too. You just talk faster. She laughed. He turned to go, then paused. Miss North, about that day over Elliott Bay, he said, meaning the fog and fear, and the first time she asked, Who are you? You asked who I was. And you dodged it, she said. I'm Lily's granddad, he replied simply. Everything else is a hat I put on or take off. She considered that. I'm my mother's daughter, she said. Everything else is a budget line. They stood there a while, watching a city they'd both learned not to underestimate. A gull cried. Tires squeaked far off. Someone in the apprentice lounge cheered at a game on TV. The bell sat quiet, graceful as an old dancer resting between songs. When they finally turned off the hangar lights, the sky held enough afterglow to walk by. As they stepped into it, Amelia thought, the best landings leave you exactly where you need to be. Feet on solid ground, heart still moving, horizon close enough to visit whenever you're ready. And that was how the janitor's flight became the city's story. Not of a man who proved a point, but of a community that learned who it could trust when the wind picked up, and a leader who learned how to share the controls. Epilogue, a year later. The first cohort of the Ruth North Initiative graduated in a hangar strung with paper airplanes. One apprentice, Janelle, former poet, present avionics tech, read a poem that sounded like a checklist and a lullaby. Pins secure, panels tight, people seen. The mayor cried into a napkin in a way his staff would never mention again. Lily, taller now, stood beside a girl in a borrowed blazer and whispered, My granddad says if you can fix a hinge, you can fix a policy. The girl nodded solemnly, as if this were scripture. After the ceremony, Amelia took a quiet corner to breathe. Hayes joined her, handing over a paper cup of coffee and a plastic fork with a bite of cake on it, because he knew she'd skip the line and then regret it. You did good, he said. You did better, she replied. They clinked paper cups, the small sound lost in the bigger sound of a city that had decided, at least for tonight, that the sky was not an exclusive club. And above them, trussed beneath the atrium's lights, the golden helicopter watched without judging. Just witness, just memory, while on the floor beneath, the kids who would one day overhaul her wandered between folding chairs, telling jokes with the ease of people who finally knew where they were going. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to support the channel so we can create more videos. Thank you, everyone.